3 days ago, I stood frozen in my childhood hallway, staring down at a pristine white name tag with calligraphy that read, Jessica, the Disappointment. My mother's 60th birthday celebration was starting in 20 minutes. A celebration I had spent 6 months planning and $15,000 funding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Nobody knew it was me who had arranged everything, who had paid for the catering, the decorations, the photographer. And there, in a neat row of family name tags, was mine. A joke that wasn't funny, a truth they thought I didn't know. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply picked up my phone, called the venue, and canceled everything. Then I walked out the front door without saying a word, the name tag still clutched in my hand. Now my inbox has 37 unread messages and my voicemail is full of family members demanding explanations. So what changed? Growing up as the middle child in the Anderson family meant learning how to disappear. Our Portland home, a sprawling Tudor with too many rooms and not enough warmth, always felt most comfortable when I found the quiet corners where no one looked. My father, Thomas, an investment banker with permanently furrowed brows, had little time for conversations that didn't involve Amanda's academic achievements or Ryan's athletic trophies. My mother, Marie, a real estate agent with a social calendar that required its own secretary, saved her genuine smiles for company and her criticisms for me. Jessica, must you always wear those dull colors? She'd say at breakfast, barely glancing up from her phone. You fade into the wallpaper. Maybe that was the point. Amanda, 2 years older and infinitely more interesting to our parents, would roll her eyes in solidarity with our mother. It's not like anyone's looking anyway, she'd mutter, just loud enough for me to hear. Ryan, 4 years younger, and the miraculous son after 2 disappointing daughters, or at least one, would be too busy with his phone to notice I was there at all. I became an expert at existing in the shadows of their lives. I learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to solve problems before they fully formed. I kept track of birthdays and anniversaries, doctor's appointments and school events. I maintained perfect grades that no one celebrated and held down part-time jobs that no one acknowledged. My bedroom, the smallest in the house with a window, facing the neighbor's brick wall, became my sanctuary. I covered the walls with maps of places I'd never been, filled bookshelves with stories of people who mattered. I kept a small corkboard above my desk where I pinned the few moments of recognition I'd gathered over the years. A thank you note from Mrs. Winters when I helped organize the community food drive. A certificate for perfect attendance that no one came to see me receive. A photo with Aunt Helen from the summer I stayed with her in Seattle while everyone else went to Europe. Aunt Helen, my mother's older sister and the only person who seemed to see me clearly. You're the glue, Jess, she told me once while we washed dishes together in her small kitchen. Families need someone like you, even if they don't realize it. I held on to those words like a life raft in the years that followed. When I graduated high school with honors and my parents missed the ceremony for Amanda's college orientation. When I finished my accounting degree and took a job at a small firm downtown, while Ryan's soccer scholarship announcement dominated 3 family dinners. When I bought my first apartment and no one came to the housewarming because it coincided with Amanda's engagement party, I was the glue, invisible but essential. Last November, Aunt Helen called me on a random Tuesday evening. Her voice sounded different, softer, more urgent. Your mother's birthday is coming up next year, she said without preamble. The big 6-0. I know, I replied, already mentally reviewing the appropriate gift options. I was thinking about... She wants a party, Helen interrupted. A big one. She's been dropping hints to everyone. I sat at my kitchen counter, watching rain streak across my apartment window. Dad will handle it, I'm sure. Helen's laugh was short and knowing. Thomas? The man who got her a vacuum cleaner for their anniversary? Besides, He's been distracted with that new project in Seattle. The silence stretched between us, filled with an unspoken request. Fine, I sighed. I'll help. I can call some venues, maybe. No, Jessica. Helen's voice grew firm. Don't just help. Take charge. Show them what you can do. But here's the thing, don't tell them it's you. Let them think Thomas stepped up, or that Amanda and Ryan pooled resources. What would be the point of that? I asked, confused. Because sometimes people need to miss something before they can see it. Helen coughed slightly, a familiar cigarette rasp despite quitting years ago. Promise me you'll do this. I have my reasons. I agreed because I always did what was asked of me, because Helen was the only one who ever really asked, and because some part of me understood what she wasn't saying. 2 weeks later, she was hospitalized with stage 4 lung cancer that had been silently spreading for months. 3 weeks after that, she was gone. At the funeral, my mother cried picture-perfect tears while my father checked emails during the eulogy. Amanda brought her fiancé who kept asking when they could leave, and Ryan showed up late, hungover from a party the night before. I sat in the front row, dry-eyed and hollow, clutching the program I had designed and printed because no one else had thought to do it. That evening, alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I would give my mother the 60th birthday party of her dreams, exactly as Aunt Helen had suggested. It would be my final act as the invisible daughter, the ultimate proof of my worth. And then I would be free. For 6 months, I lived a double life. By day, I worked at the accounting firm, managed my small but growing list of private clients, and maintained the expected level of family involvement. Sunday dinners when required, occasional coffee with my mother when summoned. By night, I became an event planner extraordinaire. I created a separate email account posing as a high-end event coordinator who had been hired by the Anderson family to create the perfect celebration. I secured the Garden View Terrace, an exclusive venue overlooking the Willamette River that normally booked a year in advance, but had a cancellation for May 15th, my mother's actual birthday. I hired a chef who had once cooked for a celebrity my mother had mentioned admiringly. I arranged for a string quartet that played the classical pieces my father pretended to appreciate. Every detail was selected with obsessive precision. The exact shade of blue that my mother favored for her living room accent pillows, the specific French champagne she bragged about tasting on their anniversary trip, centerpieces featuring the orchids she struggled to grow but claimed came easily to her. I commissioned a photo display chronicling her life, carefully selecting images where she looked her best, where she was the center of attention. I paid for everything from my savings, money I'd been putting aside for a down payment on a house, for the future I had been patiently building alone. It seemed fitting to spend it this way instead, on one magnificent moment of giving before I finally stopped. As the day approached, my mother became increasingly animated at family gatherings, dropping hints about her milestone birthday and how someone was planning something special. She looked pointedly at my father, who nodded vaguely, taking credit without knowing what for. Amanda and Ryan exchanged concerned glances, neither having prepared anything significant. "I've heard whispers," my mother told her friends loudly at Sunday dinner, 2 weeks before the event. "Thomas can't keep secrets from me. It's going to be spectacular." My father raised his eyebrows slightly but said nothing, unwilling to admit he had no idea what she was talking about. Under the table, I felt my phone vibrate with another confirmation email from the florist. I excused myself to the bathroom to respond. 1 week before the party, engraved invitations arrived at the homes of 60 guests. Family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors my mother had been trying to impress for years. The response was overwhelming, exactly as I'd anticipated. My mother called me, breathless with excitement. "Did you get the invitation? For my birthday?" she asked, not waiting for my answer. "It's at the Garden View Terrace. Can you believe it?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Your father must have pulled some serious strings. Everyone is coming. The Robertsons, the Chens, even Diane Mills, who just came back from that European cruise she wouldn't stop talking about. That's wonderful, Mom, I said, staring at my own invitation sitting on my kitchen counter. You deserve it. Well, she paused, her voice shifting slightly. I assume you'll find something appropriate to wear? Something flattering? This photographer is apparently very well known. I'll do my best, I promised, thinking of the navy blue dress already hanging in my closet, selected specifically to blend into the background. 3 days before the event, I received a call from Amanda. This was unusual. We typically communicated through obligatory group texts or via our mother. Hey, Jess. She sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. Quick question about Mom's party. What about it? I kept my voice neutral. Do you know who's actually planning it? Dad's being weird, and Ryan and I thought maybe it was you? I paused, Aunt Helen's instructions echoing in my mind. Why would it be me? I asked instead of answering. Amanda sighed. Because you're the one who always handles this stuff. But look, if it is you, Ryan and I should chip in. We can't let you pay for everything. For a moment, warmth blossomed in my chest, an acknowledgement, finally, of my consistent role as the family caretaker. Then Amanda continued. Mom would kill us if she found out her big party was only organized by you. She's been telling everyone Dad pulled strings with his business connections to make it happen. The warmth disappeared. Don't worry about it, I said flatly. Everything's taken care of. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my balcony until dawn, watching the city lights and thinking about Aunt Helen. What had she hoped would happen? That my family would suddenly recognize my worth when they discovered I'd been behind the elaborate celebration? That they'd be shocked into appreciation? It seemed naive now. People don't change overnight. Patterns established over decades don't suddenly break because of one revelation, no matter how dramatic. Still, I had committed to this plan, and I would see it through. One last act of invisible service before I stepped into a life where I could finally be seen. On the morning of my mother's birthday, I dressed carefully in the navy dress, applied minimal makeup, and drove to my parents' house. The plan was for everyone to gather there before heading to the venue. The final guests would arrive at 7 p.m., with my mother making her grand entrance at 7:30. I parked on the street rather than the driveway, another habitual accommodation. The house looked the same as always, imposing, perfectly maintained, emotionally cold. I let myself in with my key, calling out a greeting that no one answered. Voices drifted from the kitchen. My mother's excited chatter, my father's occasional hum of acknowledgement, Amanda's laugh, Ryan's deeper tones. I moved quietly down the hallway, past the living room where framed family photos chronicled a life in which I was always slightly out of focus. On the entry table by the staircase, I spotted them, a neat row of name tags laid out for the evening. Elegant things written in professional calligraphy, meant to be worn by the immediate family before more standard tags would be distributed to guests at the venue. I paused, curious about this detail I hadn't arranged. My father's read, Thomas, the successful husband. My mother's said, Marie, the woman of the hour. Amanda's proclaimed her, the accomplished daughter, and Ryan's declared him, the beloved son. And there, at the end of the row, was mine. Jessica, the disappointment. Time seemed to stop as I stared at those two words. Not a joke, not a mistake. A deliberate label chosen and approved and set out for me to wear throughout the evening. A public declaration of what they had always thought, but rarely said so directly. I picked it up, the high-quality paper smooth between my fingers. I turned it over, wondering if there might be another version, the real one, hidden as a prank. There wasn't. From the kitchen, I heard my mother laugh. Is Jessica here yet? I thought I heard the door. Probably late as usual, Amanda replied, the dismissal casual in her voice. As long as she doesn't make us late for my entrance, my mother said. Though I don't know why she bothers coming at all. It's not like she adds anything to these events. Be nice, Marie, my father's voice, surprisingly. A brief flare of hope lit in my chest. Then, she's good at taking pictures. For your social media. Put her to work. Their laughter floated down the hallway, wrapping around me like cold water. In that moment, something solidified in my chest. Not pain, but clarity. I looked again at the name tag in my hand. The disappointment. After all I had done, all I had given, all I had been, this was who they thought I was. I took out my phone and pulled up the contact for the Garden View Terrace. The manager answered on the second ring. Garden View Terrace, this is Gregory. Hello, Gregory. This is Jessica Anderson. My voice sounded far away, calm and certain. Ms. Anderson, everything is set for tonight. The staff is just making final arrangements as we discussed. The cake is spectacular, by the way. I need to cancel the event, I said simply. Silence stretched across the line. Cancel? But guests will arrive in hours. Everything is prepared. The deposits are non-refundable at this point. I understand. Cancel it anyway. Tell the guests there's been a family emergency when they arrive. The full payment will still be made as contracted. Are you absolutely certain? Gregory's professional tone couldn't quite mask his confusion. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, and realized it was true. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my purse. The name tag was still in my other hand. Without another word, without announcing my presence or saying goodbye, I turned and walked out the front door. As I drove away from my parents' house, I felt lighter than I had in years. No tears, no breakdown, just a profound sense of finally setting down a burden I'd carried for too long. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour before finding myself at a small park overlooking the city. I sat on a bench and watched the afternoon light change over Portland, thinking about what would happen next. My phone began buzzing almost immediately after 7:30 p.m., the time when my mother would have arrived to find no party, no guests, just a confused venue manager explaining there had been a cancellation. I let the calls go to voicemail and the texts pile up unread. Whatever accusations and demands were waiting could stay there. For the first time, the constant Anderson family emergency was not my responsibility to fix. As the sun set, I finally opened one message, from Sophia, my friend from college who had gradually drifted to the periphery of my life as I focused more and more on being available for my family. Are you okay? Your mom's party was canceled, and everyone's talking about it. Call me if you need anything. I typed back a simple response. I'm fine. Better than fine. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Her reply was instant. Absolutely. Usual place at 10? That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months, perhaps years. The next morning, I woke to 37 unread messages and 12 voicemails. I ignored them all and got ready to meet Sophia. Our usual place was a small coffee shop downtown, far enough from my parents' neighborhood to avoid any potential run-ins. Sophia was already there when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table. Her concerned expression melted into confusion as I approached. You look good, she said, studying my face. Really good, actually. What's going on? Your entire family is having a collective meltdown. Your mom's friends are posting sympathy messages on Facebook like someone died. I couldn't help but smile as I sat down. Something did die. My need to please people who never appreciated it. Sophia's eyebrows rose. Okay, I'm going to need the whole story. So I told her. Everything. The 6 months of planning, the thousands of dollars spent, Aunt Helen's final request, and finally, the name tag that broke the spell. Sophia listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to something like admiration. The disappointment she repeated when I finished. They actually wrote that and expected you to wear it after you arranged everything? They didn't know I arranged it, I reminded her. That was the point. Aunt Helen wanted them to realize what I contribute by seeing what happens when I don't. Well, mission accomplished, I'd say. Sophia took a sip of her coffee. So what now? It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. Now I live my life for me. I've spent 32 years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I'm done. What about the fallout? They're going to want explanations. I shrugged. They can want. I don't owe them anything. As if on cue, my phone lit up with my mother's name. After 3 days of ignoring her calls, I decided to answer. I put the phone on speaker so Sophia could hear. Jessica, finally. My mother's voice was tight with controlled fury. Where have you been? Do you have any idea what happened? Your father's surprise party for me was canceled without explanation. We were humiliated in front of everyone we know. I met Sophia's eyes across the table and felt strangely calm. It wasn't Dad's party, Mom. It was mine. I planned it. I paid for it. And I canceled it. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, what are you talking about? Why would you? That's impossible. The Garden View Terrace? The guest list? That chef from Seattle? All me. 6 months of planning. $15,000. My entire savings. But why would you cancel? Was this some kind of revenge? For what? I closed my eyes briefly. Even now, she couldn't see it. Check the name tags you laid out for the family, Mom. Mine says the disappointment. That's why. Another long silence. Then, in a smaller voice, oh, those. That was just Amanda being silly. It wasn't serious. It was serious enough to set out for me to wear all night. It was serious enough that no one thought there was anything wrong with it. You're overreacting. My mother's voice hardened again. It was a joke. And even if you were upset, that's no reason to ruin my birthday. Do you know what people are saying? The Robertsons sent a sympathy arrangement. Diane Mills called to ask if there had been a death in the family. There was, I said simply. The death of me trying to be enough for you. I ended the call before she could respond. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. That couldn't have been easy. It should have been hard. After a lifetime of seeking approval, of smoothing things over, of making myself smaller to fit their expectations, this rebellion should have felt traumatic. Instead, it felt like breathing clearly for the first time. What's your plan? Sophia asked after a moment. I hadn't realized I had one until she asked, but suddenly it was obvious. I'm going to use what's left of my vacation days, go to the coast for a week, clear my head. Want company? She offered. I could use a few days. Away too. 2 hours later, we were driving west toward the Oregon coast, windows down, music playing. My phone continued to buzz occasionally. Amanda, Ryan, my father eventually joining the chorus of demands for explanation and reconciliation. I turned it off and tossed it into the glove compartment. The small beach house we rented was nothing. Like my parents' elegant home. Weathered wood siding, mismatched furniture, windows that stuck when the humidity was high. But it had a deck overlooking the ocean and a quiet that seeped into my bones. For 3 days, Sophia and I walked on. The beach, cooked simple meals and talked like we used to before my family obligations had consumed my life. On our last evening, sitting on the deck with glasses of wine, watching the sunset, Sophia asked the question I'd been waiting for. Will you ever tell them about Helen? That this was her idea? I considered it, watching a seagull wheel against ye. The darkening sky. No. Aunt Helen knew what would happen. She knew they wouldn't change, but she wanted me to see it clearly. This was her parting gift. Permission to stop trying. Your mom's been posting thinly veiled comments about ungrateful children, Sophia said, checking her phone. And Amanda shared something about toxic family members who cause drama for attention. I laughed, the sound carried away by the ocean breeze. Of course they have. It's easier than looking in the mirror. Does it hurt? Sophia asked quietly. Less than pretending, I answered honestly. When we returned to Portland, I submitted my 2 weeks' notice at the accounting firm. I had enough clients on the side to sustain me while I built my own practice, something I'd been qualified to do for years, but had put off because it would mean less availability for family crises. I also began looking for a new apartment, somewhere without memories, without expectations. The flood of messages from my family gradually slowed to a trickle as days passed without response. Eventually, my father sent a terse email. Whatever point you're trying to make has been made. Your mother is upset. Fix this. I didn't reply. A week later, Amanda appeared at my office as I was packing my things. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. So this is really happening? You're just done with us? Her tone was accusatory, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. I'm done being the disappointment, I corrected. I'm done trying to earn love that should be freely given. It was a stupid joke with the name tags. I didn't think you'd even notice. That's the problem, Amanda. None of you noticed me unless I was useful. Did you know I've paid for Mom's birthday gift from Dad for the last 3 years? That I'm the one who reminds him of their anniversary? That I've been editing Ryan's resumes and cover letters since he graduated? She looked genuinely surprised. No, why would you do all that? Because I thought if I made myself essential, I'd become visible. I was wrong. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. Mom and Dad want you at Sunday dinner, to talk. I shook my head. I'm not interested in another opportunity to be told how I've failed to meet expectations. They said they're sorry, she offered, though her tone suggested she was just relaying a message she didn't quite believe. No, they're sorry there was no party. They're sorry they were embarrassed. That's different. Amanda pushed off from the doorframe, frustration evident in her posture. So that's it? 32 years of family just over? Because of one bad joke? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt a strange new compassion. She was as trapped in the family's dynamic as I had been, just with a different role. The golden child was its own kind of prison. It's not over, Amanda. It's just changed. I won't be at their beck and call anymore. I won't be the invisible safety net. If they want me in their lives, it will be on equal terms. She left without another word, but something in her expression suggested she understood more than she was willing to admit. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new apartment across town. It was smaller than my old place, but filled with light from windows that faced the sunrise. I painted the walls colors my mother would hate: warm terracotta in the living room, a bold teal in the bedroom. I bought furniture for comfort rather than appearance. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a one-eyed tabby no one else wanted, and named him Helen. My private accounting practice grew steadily. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, joined a hiking group, took a pottery class on Wednesday evenings, all things I'd put off because they might conflict with family obligations. I began to recognize myself again, or perhaps for the first time. My mother's messages shifted from demands to guilt trips, then to awkward attempts at normalcy, as if canceling her elaborate birthday party was just a minor disagreement. My father sent a check for the amount I'd spent, which I returned uncashed. Ryan reached out occasionally with technical questions, transparently searching for ways to maintain contact without addressing what had happened. 3 months after the non-party, I received a letter in the mail, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter from my mother. I sat on my balcony to read it, Helen the cat purring in my lap. Jessica, it began formally, I found your name tag. The one Amanda made as what she insists was just a joke. I've been thinking about how it must have felt to see that. I'm not good at admitting when I'm wrong, but in this case I was. We all were. The party you planned sounds like it would have been wonderful, and the fact that you did it anonymously says more about your character than I care to examine about mine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How we treated you, what we expected, what we failed to give in return. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not as the woman of the hour, just as your mother trying to do better. Marie. I folded the letter carefully and put it away. Not in a shrine of rare acknowledgments like I once would have, but simply in a drawer with other correspondence. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A beginning, perhaps. The next day, I sent a brief reply, not agreeing to meet, not promising reconciliation, but opening a door that had seemed permanently closed. Thank you for your letter. I needed to hear that. I'm still finding my way forward, but I'm not opposed to you finding yours too. Jessica. It was enough for now. The future would take care of itself. Have you ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth? Have you found the courage to demand better treatment even when it meant being alone? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. Most people, when they feel invisible, grow louder. They shout, they demand, they fill whatever room they're in with noise and presence until someone, anyone, looks their way. I did the opposite. I leaned into the invisibility, made it mine, perfected it like an art form. It wasn't that I wanted to disappear. I just realized early on that in the Anderson household, being seen usually meant being criticized. Being heard meant becoming a target. Invisibility became my armor. My mother's words from my childhood echoed like background music as I drove back to my apartment from the park. Jessica, do you have to stand so close to the camera? Jessica, that laugh is too attention-seeking. Jessica, no one is asking. For your opinion right now. Little corrections, always delivered with a tight smile that never reached her eyes, molded me into someone who took up less and less space. Amanda was the opposite. Bold, demanding, unapologetically visible. She knows her worth, my mother would say proudly. What she meant was, Amanda knows her place is at the center, while yours is on the periphery. Ryan came later, the golden child, the son they'd almost given up hoping for. Finally, someone to carry on the Anderson name, my father had announced at the hospital, as if Amanda and I were somehow incomplete versions of what they'd wanted all along. By the time I reached college, I had mastered the art of anticipating others' needs before they recognized them themselves. I became the friend who remembered birthdays, who took notes when someone was absent, who coordinated group projects and assigned tasks without taking credit. My roommates loved me because I made their lives easier without demanding recognition. My professors appreciated my reliable work, but rarely remembered my name at department events. I majored in accounting because numbers made sense. Clear, logical, impossible to misinterpret. I was good at it, finding patterns where others saw only chaos, bringing order to financial tangles with the precision that eventually became my professional reputation. After graduation, I took a position at a mid-sized firm in Portland, not the prestigious offers some of my classmates received, but something stable, something safe. Just an accountant? My mother had sighed when I told her. Amanda's in law. School, you know. Top of her class. I knew. We all knew. It was mentioned at every family gathering, slipped into conversations with neighbors, highlighted in the annual Christmas cards my mother meticulously crafted each year. Amanda's achievements were family currency. Mine were pocket change. My apartment became my sanctuary, a small one-bedroom in a converted warehouse downtown. My mother called it depressingly industrial, the one time she visited. I called Mine. Every piece of furniture I selected myself. Every book on the shelves reflected my interests, not what someone else thought I should be reading. Every plant thrived under my care, unlike the ones at my parents' house that wilted under my mother's sporadic attention. It was in this apartment that I received the call that would ultimately lead to the name tag, to the cancellation, to my rebirth as someone who finally demanded to be seen. Aunt Helen had always been an anomaly in our family. My mother's older sister, she was everything Marie was not. Loud, messy, unapologetically herself. She wore bright colors and statement jewelry, laughed too loudly in restaurants, and said exactly what she thought regardless of the social cost. My mother both envied and resented her, maintaining a relationship that consisted primarily of competitive comparisons, thinly veiled as sisterly concern. "Helen's still single, you know," she would tell me, as if singlehood was a terminal condition. "All that independence, and where has it gotten her? A one-bedroom apartment and a cat." The disdain in her voice couldn't quite mask the curiosity about a road not taken. What my mother never acknowledged was that Helen had chosen her life deliberately. She had walked away from a lucrative position at a national bank to start her own financial consulting practice for small businesses and nonprofits. She lived in a modest apartment because she donated a significant portion of her income to causes she believed in. She traveled extensively, returned with stories rather than souvenirs, and seemed genuinely content with her choices. To me, she was a revelation, proof that there was another way to be an Anderson woman. The summer I turned 15, I spent 2 weeks with Aunt Helen while my parents took Amanda on college tours and Ryan to soccer camp. Those 14 days changed everything for me. Helen treated me not as an inconvenience or a disappointment, but as a person worthy of attention. She asked questions and actually listened to my answers. She took me to museums and bookstores, not to improve me, but because she thought I might enjoy them. She introduced me to her friends, creative, interesting people who asked about my opinions, as if they mattered. "You know what I see when I look at you, Jessica?" she asked one evening as we sat on her small balcony, watching the sunset paint the city gold. "I see someone who notices everything, who understands more than people give her credit for. That's rare and valuable." I had shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just pay attention." "Exactly," she nodded. "Most people are so busy thinking about what they'll say next, they miss what's happening right in front of them. You don't. That's a superpower, kiddo." A superpower. Not a flaw, not something to correct or minimize, but something valuable. Something to cultivate. When I returned home, my mother barely asked about my time with Helen. "Did she feed you properly? That woman lives on takeout and wine." But something had shifted inside me. I still moved quietly through the house, still anticipated needs, still made myself useful rather than demanding attention. But now I watched with new awareness, seeing the patterns that defined our family dynamic, understanding that what was happening wasn't my fault or my failing. Over the years, Helen became my touchstone. Not a second mother. She was too honest, too unfiltered for that role, but a compass pointing toward a different kind of life than the one I was living. We had lunch every few months, spoke on the phone regularly, exchanged emails that my mother would have found bafflingly personal. She was the one person in my family who saw me clearly and loved what she saw. When Helen was diagnosed with cancer, she approached it with the same directness she applied to everything else. "Well, this is a plot twist I didn't see coming," she told me over coffee, her voice matter of fact. "Stage 4 means exactly what you think it means, Jess. I'm not going to waste what time I have left pretending otherwise." I had nodded, fighting. Back tears, appreciating her candor even as it broke my heart. What can I do? "You can promise not to let your mother turn my funeral into a social event," she said with a wry smile. "And you can do one thing for me. Something important." That something, of course, was the party. Helen's reasons were more complex than she initially let on. It wasn't just about showing my family what I contributed. It was about something deeper, a reckoning she believed was overdue. Marie has spent her whole life performing, Helen explained during one of our last conversations, her voice thin but determined. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect pillar of the community. She's built a life around being seen a certain way, and she's sacrificed authenticity for approval. And somewhere along the way, she taught you to do the same, just in the opposite direction. I had frowned, not fully understanding. Helen continued, her breathing labored between sentences. She taught you to be invisible by making it the safest option. But Jess, invisible isn't the same as insignificant. I want you to show her, show all of them, what you've been doing from the shadows. And then I want you to decide if that's still where you want to live. Helen died on a Tuesday morning in February. I was there, holding her hand as she slipped away, her final words a whispered, "Remember what matters." My mother arrived 20 minutes later, already on the phone with the funeral director, already planning, organizing, controlling the narrative. The funeral was exactly what Helen would have hated, and exactly what my mother thought appropriate. Somber, formal, filled with people making the expected gestures of grief without the messy reality of it. I wrote the eulogy, but my mother edited it heavily, removing the references to Helen's activism, smoothing away the edges of her personality, turning her into a generic, beloved sister, rather than the complex, contradictory, magnificent person she had been. I delivered the sanitized version, my voice steady, my eyes dry because tears would have been unseemly, according to my mother. Afterward, during the reception, I overheard Marie telling one of her friends, "Helen always was difficult. Even at the end, refusing treatment that might have given us more time with her. So stubborn." It was a fundamental misunderstanding of who Helen had been. She hadn't refused treatment out of stubbornness, but out of a clear-eyed assessment of quality versus quantity of life. But that was my mother's gift, reshaping reality to fit her. Preferred narrative, even when that narrative had little connection to the truth. That night, alone in my apartment with Helen's absence, a physical ache in my chest, I made the decision to honor her final request. I would give my mother the 60th birthday celebration she had been hinting about for months. I would make it spectacular, memorable, worthy of the social media posts Marie would inevitably share. And I would do it all anonymously, letting her believe it was Thomas or Amanda or Ryan who had finally stepped up. The planning consumed me in the weeks that followed. It became a way to process my grief, channeling it into something productive rather than sitting with the raw pain of loss. I created spreadsheets, budgets, timelines. I researched venues, caterers, entertainment. I designed invitations, planned seating arrangements, selected floral displays. Each decision was made with meticulous attention to my mother's preferences. The Garden View Terrace wasn't just exclusive, it offered the perfect backdrop for photos, with the river and city skyline creating a cinematic setting my mother would love. The menu featured dishes she had mentioned admiringly when dining at upscale restaurants. The music included pieces she claimed to appreciate when trying to impress cultural sophisticates. I knew my mother better than anyone, not because she had shared herself with me, but because I had spent a lifetime observing her, noting her reactions, cataloging her preferences. I could anticipate what would please her with an accuracy that would have been unsettling if examined too closely. The cost was staggering, nearly all of my savings, money I had been carefully setting, aside for years with some vague notion of future security. But there was something liberating about committing those resources to this final act of invisible service. After this, I would be free of the obligation to anticipate, to provide, to smooth the way for a family that had never truly seen me. As the date approached, I maintained my usual routine. Sunday dinners when required, occasional coffee with my mother, professional courtesy with my father when our paths crossed. I listened as Marie dropped increasingly unsubtle hints about her milestone birthday, watched as Thomas nodded vaguely, taking credit for arrangements he knew nothing about, observed Amanda and Ryan exchanging concerned glances as they realized they were expected to contribute to something they hadn't planned. The weekend before the party, my mother called, her voice pitched with barely contained excitement. "Jessica, what are you wearing to my birthday celebration? Amanda's found this gorgeous cocktail dress, and Ryan's actually agreed to wear a suit. We should coordinate for the photos." "I haven't decided yet," I replied, staring at the navy dress already hanging in my closet. Conservative, unremarkable, designed to blend into the background of any family photos that might be taken. "Well, don't leave it to the last minute. And please, something with a bit of color this time. That gray thing you wore to Amanda's engagement party made you look like you were attending a funeral." I had chosen that dress specifically because it was Amanda's day, not mine. The irony was both painful and amusing. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, making a mental note to stick with the navy. After all, this would be my last performance as the supportive sister, the dutiful daughter, the audience member, rather than the main character. The day before the party, I did a final walkthrough at the venue with Gregory, the event manager, who had been my primary contact throughout the planning process. He was a consummate professional, discreet, efficient, and, I suspected, quietly amused by the elaborate subterfuge. "Everything is in order, Ms. Anderson," he confirmed as we stood in the main reception area, staff bustling around us hanging decorations and arranging tables. "The florist will arrive at 3 p.m. tomorrow, the caterer at 4, the string quartet at 5:30. Bar service begins at 6 when the first guests arrive. We've arranged for the photographer to capture the entrance at 7:30 as requested." I nodded, a sense of completion settling over me. "And nobody has contacted you directly? My father or siblings?" Gregory shook his head. "Only the communications through the email you established. Your family still believes this was arranged by someone else?" "Yes," I smiled slightly. "That's perfect." He hesitated, then said, carefully, "If you don't mind my asking, why go to such lengths to create this celebration without taking credit?" It was a reasonable question, one I had asked myself repeatedly over the months of planning. The answer had evolved from Helen's directive to something more complex, more personal. Sometimes giving someone exactly what they want is the clearest way to show them what they've been asking for, I said finally. Gregory nodded, though I doubted he fully understood. That was fine. I wasn't sure I fully understood myself, not yet. But I would soon enough. That evening, I prepared with the same quiet efficiency I brought to everything. I laid out my clothes for the next day, confirmed my hair appointment, checked and rechecked that all vendors had the final instructions. I slept surprisingly well, waking before my alarm with a sense of purpose that had been missing in the weeks since Helen's death. I spent the morning at the salon, indulging in professional hairstyling, not for vanity's sake, but because my mother would expect it, and this final performance needed to be flawless. I kept my makeup minimal, my jewelry understated. The navy dress, when I finally put it on, was exactly as I'd intended. Elegant enough to meet the dress code, but designed not to draw attention. My mother had texted 3 times already. Don't be late to the house. We're all meeting there at 5. Wear the pearl earrings I gave you for Christmas. They'll look good in photos. Remind your father to bring his good watch. The one with the leather band, not the metal one. I responded to each with brief acknowledgement, playing my assigned role one last time. The drive to my parents' house was familiar. I could have navigated it blindfolded. The Tudor-style home looked exactly as it always did, imposing and immaculate, my father's luxury sedan and my mother's SUV parked in the circular driveway. I deliberately parked on the street, a habit formed years ago when my mother complained that my ordinary car detracted from the home's curb appeal. I let myself in, calling out a greeting as I always did. No one responded, but I could hear voices from the kitchen. My mother's excited chatter, my father's occasional hum of acknowledgement, Amanda's laugh, Ryan's deeper tones. Family sounds that didn't include me. I moved down the hallway, past the living room with its carefully arranged family photos that always seemed to catch me at an awkward angle or partially out of frame. The house smelled of my mother's signature perfume and the flowers she always had delivered on Fridays. A presentation of domestic perfection rather than lived-in comfort. On the entry table by the staircase, I spotted them, a neat row of name tags laid out for the evening. Elegant things written in professional calligraphy, meant to be worn by the immediate family. This was a detail I hadn't planned, something my mother or Amanda must have added. I slowed, curious. My father's read, Thomas, the successful husband. My mother's said Marie, the woman of the hour. Amanda's proclaimed her the accomplished daughter, and Ryan's declared him the beloved son. And then, at the end of the row, was mine. Jessica, the disappointment. The words didn't register, at first. I stared at the elegant script, the high-quality paper, the perfect coordination with the evening's color scheme. So much thought had gone into this small item. Someone had ordered these specially, had provided the titles to the calligrapher, had approved the proofs, had set them out carefully in this precise arrangement. The disappointment. Not a hasty joke, not a last-minute addition. A deliberate label that someone in my family thought appropriate, that no one had questioned or challenged. From the kitchen, I heard my mother laugh. "Is Jessica here yet?" I thought I heard the door. "Probably late as usual," Amanda replied, the dismissal casual in her voice. "As long as she doesn't make us late for my entrance," my mother said. "Though I don't know why she bothers coming at all. It's not like she adds anything to these events." "Be nice, Marie," my father's voice surprisingly. A brief flare of hope lit in my chest. Then, "She's good at taking pictures for your social." "Media! Put her to work!" Their laughter floated down the hallway, wrapping around me like cold water. In that moment, something crystallized in my chest. Not pain, which would have been familiar, but clarity. A perfect, diamond-hard clarity about who I was to them and who I could be if I chose differently. I looked again at the name tag in my hand, the disappointment. After all I had done, all I had given, all I had been, this was how they saw me. This was the role I had been assigned and had accepted for too long. I took out my phone and scrolled to the contact for the Garden View Terrace. The manager answered promptly. "Garden View Terrace, this is Gregory." "Hello, Gregory. This is Jessica Anderson." My voice sounded different to my own ears, calm, certain, unburdened. "Ms. Anderson, everything is set for tonight. The staff is just making final arrangements as we discussed. The cake is spectacular, by the way." "I need to cancel the event," I said simply. The silence stretched across the line. "Cancel? But guests will arrive in hours. Everything is prepared. The deposits are non-refundable at this point." "I understand. Cancel it anyway. Tell the guests there's been a family emergency when they arrive. The full payment will still be made as contracted." "Are you absolutely certain?" Gregory's professional tone couldn't quite mask his confusion. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, and realized it was true. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my purse. The name tag was still in my other hand. Without another word, without announcing my presence or saying, "Goodbye," I turned and walked out the front door. As I drove away from my parents' house, I felt a weight lifting. Years of trying to be enough, of making myself less, of accepting the scraps of acknowledgement thrown my way. No tears, no breakdown, just a profound sense of finally setting down a burden I'd carried for too long. I drove without destination for almost an hour, eventually finding myself at Washington Park, a place I'd often come with Aunt Helen during our outings. I sat on a bench overlooking the Japanese garden, watching the light change through the trees as afternoon faded toward evening. My phone began buzzing almost immediately after 7:30 p.m., the time when my mother would have arrived, at the venue to find no party, no guests, just a confused manager explaining there had been a cancellation. I watched the notifications pile up. Mom, Jessica, call me immediately. Something's happened with the party. Amanda, WTF is going on? Mom's freaking out. Ryan, dude, where are you? Shit's hitting the fan. Dad, your mother is upset. Fix this. The demands were so familiar. The expectation that I would smooth things over, make everything better, fix whatever had gone wrong regardless of fault. I turned off notifications and slipped the phone back into my purse. The Japanese garden was closing soon, the late spring evening settling into twilight. I walked slowly through the paths, breathing in the scent of moss and fresh growth, feeling more present in my body than I had in months, perhaps years. By the time I returned to my apartment, it was fully dark. I kicked off my heels, unzipped the navy dress and let it fall to the floor, a discarded costume from a role I would no longer play. I took a long shower, washing away the careful makeup, the hairspray, the last traces of the person I had been pretending to be. Wrapped in a comfortable robe, I finally looked at my phone. 37 unread messages and 12 voicemails. The urgency of them, the entitlement, struck me as almost comical now. I set the phone aside without reading or listening to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to a folder I had created months ago labeled After. It contained research on small towns along the Oregon coast, rental listings, job opportunities for accountants in less urban settings. A contingency plan I hadn't been fully conscious of making until this moment. I sent 3 emails, one to my supervisor requesting personal leave, one to my landlord inquiring about breaking my lease, one to a real estate agent in Cannon Beach asking to view several properties I had bookmarked. Then I slept, deeply, dreamlessly, without the usual background anxiety about family obligations or workplace responsibilities. I woke to sunlight streaming through my blinds and a sense of possibility I hadn't felt since those 2 weeks with Aunt Helen all those years ago. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. In the cold light of morning, I read through the messages, watching the progression from confusion to anger to blame to demands for explanation. My mother's final text, sent at 2:17 a.m., read simply, "I don't understand how you could do this to me. Not, why did this happen, but how could you do this to me?" Even in crisis, she saw herself as the center of the narrative, everyone else merely supporting characters in her story. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I called Sophia, my college roommate, and one of the few people I had maintained a genuine connection with despite my family's constant demands on my time and energy. "Jess?" Her voice was surprised but warm. "It's been forever. How are you?" I paused, searching for the right word. "Free, or getting there. Can we meet for coffee?" An hour later, we sat across from each other at our favorite downtown cafe. Sophia looked exactly the same. Warm brown eyes, curly hair pulled into a messy bun, that focused attention that made whoever she was talking to feel like the most important person in the room. "Okay, spill," she said after we'd exchanged initial pleasantries. "You look different. Good different, but definitely different." So I told her everything. The 6 months of planning, the thousands spent, Aunt Helen's final request, and finally, the name tag that broke the spell. Sophia listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage to something like respect. "The disappointment," she repeated when I finished. "They actually wrote that? And expected you to wear it after you arranged everything?" "They didn't know I arranged it," I reminded her. "That was the point. Aunt Helen wanted them to realize what I contribute by seeing what happens when I don't." Well, mission accomplished, I'd say. Sophia took a sip of her coffee. So what? Now? It was the question I'd been asking myself all night, all morning, perhaps for years. Now I live for me. I've spent 32 years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. I'm done. What about the fallout? They're going to want explanations, apologies, probably some serious groveling. I shrugged. They can want. I don't owe them anything. As if on cue, my phone lit up with my mother's name. After 3 days of ignoring her calls, I decided to answer, putting the phone on speaker so Sophia could hear. Jessica, finally! My mother's voice was tight with controlled fury. Where have you been? Do you have any idea what happened? Your father's surprise party for me was canceled without explanation. We were humiliated in front of everyone we know. I met Sophia's eyes across the table and felt strangely calm. It wasn't Dad's party, Mom. It was mine. I planned it, I paid for it, and I canceled it. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, what are you talking about? Why would you? That's impossible. The Garden View Terrace? The guest list? That chef from Seattle? All me. 6 months of planning, $15,000. My entire savings. But why would you cancel it? Was this some kind of revenge? For what? I closed my eyes briefly. Even now, she couldn't see it. Check the name tags you laid out for the family, Mom. Mine says, The Disappointment. That's why. Another long silence. Then in a smaller voice, Oh, those. That was just Amanda being silly. It wasn't serious. It was serious enough to set out for me to wear all night. It was serious enough that no one thought there was anything wrong with it. You're overreacting. My mother's voice hardened again. It was a joke. And even if you were upset, that's no reason to ruin my birthday. Do you know what people are saying? The Robertsons sent a sympathy arrangement. Diane Mills called to ask if there had been a death in the family. There was, I said simply. The death of me trying to be enough for you. I ended the call before she could respond. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. That couldn't have been easy. But it had been easy, surprisingly so. After a lifetime of seeking approval, of smoothing things over, of making myself smaller to fit their expectations, this rebellion should have felt traumatic. Instead, it felt like breathing clearly for the first time. What's your plan? Sophia asked, besides ignoring your family's meltdown. I hadn't realized I had one until she asked, but suddenly it was obvious. I'm going to the coast for a week. Clear my head, figure out next steps. Want company? She offered. I could use a few days away too. 2 hours later, we were driving west toward Cannon Beach, windows down, music playing. My phone continued to buzz occasionally, but I'd silenced all notifications from my family. Whatever crisis they were manufacturing would have to unfold without my intervention. The small beach house we rented was nothing like my parents' elegant home. Weathered wood siding, mismatched furniture, windows that stuck when the humidity was high. But it had a deck overlooking the ocean and a quiet that seeped into my bones. For 3 days, Sophia and I walked on the beach, cooked simple meals, and talked like we used to before my family obligations had consumed my life. On our last evening, sitting on the deck with glasses of wine, watching the sunset, Sophia asked the question I'd been waiting for. Will you ever tell them about Helen? That this was her idea? I considered it, watching seabirds wheel against the darkening sky. No. Aunt Helen knew what would happen. She knew they wouldn't change, but she wanted me to see it clearly. This was her parting gift, permission to stop trying. Your mom's been posting thinly veiled comments about ungrateful children, Sophia said, checking her phone. And Amanda shared something about toxic family members who cause drama for attention. I laughed, the sound carried away by the ocean breeze. Of course they have. It's easier than looking in the mirror. Does it hurt? Sophia asked quietly. Less than pretending, I answered honestly. When I returned to Portland after those healing days at the coast, something had fundamentally changed. Not just in how I viewed my family, but in how I moved through the world. I walked differently. Shoulders back, gaze direct, steps purposeful. I spoke differently. Voice clear, without the habitual apologetic tone I'd cultivated over years of trying not to take up space. I even breathed differently, deeply, fully, without the constant tightness in my chest that had become so familiar. I'd stopped noticing it. Sophia noticed immediately as we drove back into the city. You know what's different about you? She asked, glancing over as she navigated downtown traffic. You're present, like fully here. I considered this. I think I've spent most of my life bracing for the next criticism, the next disappointment, the next reminder that I wasn't enough. It takes a lot of energy to live that way. And now? Now I'm just living. My apartment felt smaller when I returned, as if I'd outgrown it during my brief absence. I moved through the rooms with new eyes, seeing how many of my choices, the neutral colors, the minimal decor, the carefully organized storage, reflected my ingrained habit of taking up as little space as possible. Even here, in my own home, I had unconsciously continued the pattern. The first thing I did was paint the kitchen, a rich, vibrant teal that would have made my mother wince. I bought new pillows for the couch in patterns that clashed gloriously. I hung art that spoke to me rather than complimented the furniture. Small acts of rebellion, perhaps, but each one felt like a declaration. This is my space, and I will fill it as I choose. My phone continued to accumulate messages from my family. I didn't delete them, but I didn't respond either. Instead, I created a new email address and phone number for professional contacts and close friends, gradually transferring my life away from the channels my family had always used to summon me. The first real test came when I returned to work. I had taken 2 weeks of personal leave, using vacation days I'd accumulated over years of rarely taking time off. My supervisor, Keith, called me into his office on my first day back. Everything. Okay, Jessica? He asked, concern evident in his voice. You've never taken more than a day or two off in the 5 years you've been here. I considered the standard response, an apology, a minimization, a reassurance that it wouldn't happen again. Instead, I said, my aunt died. She was important to me. And then some family issues came to a head. I needed the time. Keith nodded, waiting for more. When I didn't elaborate, he shifted uncomfortably. Well, we missed you. Johnson couldn't find half the files for the Taylor audit, and the Montgomery account reconciliation is overdue. I'll take care of it, I said, then added, but Keith, we should talk about my workload. I've been handling twice the accounts of anyone else in the department. His eyes widened slightly. I had never complained before, never pointed out the inequity that everyone, including me, had simply accepted as the natural order. Yes, I suppose that's true. You've always seemed to manage it so well. I have. But going forward, I'd like a more equitable distribution. And I'd like to discuss the promotion that's been under consideration for the past 18 months. The conversation that followed was uncomfortable, direct, and long overdue. I left with a scheduled performance review, a commitment to reassign, 3 major accounts, and a slight increase in salary effective immediately. It wasn't everything I deserved, but it was a start. And more importantly, it was the first time I had advocated for myself in a professional setting without immediately backtracking or apologizing. Walking to my car that evening, I felt a surge of something unfamiliar. Pride, yes, but also a kind of wonder at how straightforward it had been to simply ask for what I was worth. At home, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter addressed in my mother's distinctive script. I set it on the kitchen counter and went about my evening routine, making dinner, reading, preparing for the next day. The letter sat there, neither opened nor discarded, a physical manifestation of the choice I now faced. After dinner, I picked it up, weighing it in my hand. Whatever it contained, accusations, guilt trips, perhaps even a rare apology, would be an attempt to pull me back into the family dynamic. The question was whether I could engage on my own terms, or if any engagement would inevitably lead back to old patterns. I opened it carefully, extracting a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. "Jessica," it began formally. "I found your name tag. The one Amanda made as what she insists was just a joke. I've been thinking about how it must have felt to see that. I'm not good at admitting when I'm wrong, but in this case, I was. We all were. The party you planned sounds like it would have been wonderful, and the fact that you did it anonymously says more about your character than I care to examine about mine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, how we treated you, what we expected, what we failed to give in return. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not as the woman of the hour, just as your mother, trying to do better." Marie. I read it twice, searching for the hidden hook, the subtle manipulation, the backhanded compliment that would reveal this as just another tactic. But the words remained straightforward, the acknowledgement clear, the absence of demands. Surprising. I folded the letter carefully and put it away, not enshrined as I once would have done with any rare sign of maternal approval, but simply stored with other correspondence. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A beginning, perhaps. The next day, I sent a brief reply, not agreeing to meet, not promising reconciliation, but opening a door that had seemed permanently closed. "Thank you for your letter. I needed to hear that. I'm still finding my way forward, but I'm not opposed to you finding yours too. Jessica." In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life around what I wanted, rather than what was expected of me. I joined a hiking group that met on Sunday mornings, deliberately scheduling it to conflict with family dinners. I took a pottery class on Wednesday evenings and discovered I had a natural aptitude for the wheel, creating pieces that were slightly asymmetrical but distinctively mine. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away as my family obligations consumed more and more of my time. I also began looking for a new place to live. My apartment, while functional, carried the energy of old patterns, old compromises. I wanted somewhere that had no history, no associations with who I had been. On a rainy Saturday in June, a real estate agent showed me a small craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood I'd always loved but had dismissed as unattainable. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated, the bathroom cramped, the backyard overgrown. But it had character, history, potential. Large windows filled it with natural light even on the grayest day, and built-in bookshelves lined the living room walls. "It's at the very top of your budget," the agent warned as I stood in the empty living room, imagining it filled with color and life. "I'll make an offer," I said, surprising myself with the certainty. That evening, I called Sophia to share the news. "I'm buying a house," I announced when she answered. "A real house, with a yard and everything." "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "The one in Selwood? With the reading nook?" "That's the one, if they accept my offer." "They will. It's perfect for you. Very Jessica." I laughed. What does that mean? Very Jessica. Solid, understatedly, beautiful, with hidden depth and potential. Her words caught me off guard. Not just the compliment, but the implication that there was a Jessica to be very like. A distinctive person with identifiable traits rather than a chameleon adapting to others' expectations. "Thank you," I said simply. "For what? Stating the obvious? You've always been extraordinary, Jess. Some of us have known that all along." The conversation shifted to practical matters, mortgage rates, moving logistics, furniture needs, but her words stayed with me. Extraordinary. Not a word anyone in my family would have associated with me. Not a word I would have applied to myself. But perhaps it was time to reconsider those assumptions along with everything else. My offer on the house was accepted 3 days later. The timeline suddenly accelerated. Inspections, paperwork, packing, planning. In the midst of this productive chaos, Amanda appeared at my apartment door one evening, unannounced and clearly uncomfortable. I hadn't seen any of my family since the night of the canceled party, nearly 2 months earlier. Amanda looked different somehow, less polished, more human. Her designer handbag clashed with her casual outfit, as if she'd grabbed the first things she found rather than curating her appearance as she usually did. "Can I come in?" she asked when I opened the door. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "I was just packing," I said, gesturing to the boxes stacked in my living room. "You're moving?" Her surprise seemed genuine. "Where?" "I bought a house in Selwood." She nodded slowly, taking in this information along with the changes to my apartment. The bold colors, the personal touches, the evidence of a life expanding rather than contracting. "Mom got your note," she said finally, perching awkwardly on the edge of my couch. "She's been different, quieter." I waited, offering neither encouragement nor resistance. "She told us about the party, that you arranged it all, that you paid for everything." Amanda fiddled with the strap of her bag. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked, genuinely curious. If I had said I was planning Mom's birthday, would anyone have noticed or cared? She opened her mouth to object, then closed it again. "I guess we'll never know," she said finally. "I guess not." The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history, unacknowledged hurts, unexamined assumptions. "About the name tag," Amanda began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "It was stupid and mean. I was angry because Dad kept hinting that someone was handling the party, and I assumed it was you because it's always you, and I was embarrassed that I hadn't done anything. So I lashed out. It was wrong." It was the most direct acknowledgement I'd ever received from my sister. No qualifications, no "but you always," no shifting of responsibility. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Is that it?" she asked, a flash of the old Amanda surfacing. "I apologize and you just say, 'Thank you'? No yelling, no dredging up every time I've ever hurt your feelings?" I considered this. What would be the point? We both know our history. The question is whether we want something different going forward. And do you want something different? I looked at my sister, really. Looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the perfect exterior, the accomplished daughter persona, I saw someone trapped in her own way, bound by expectations and performance metrics just as I had been, only in the opposite direction. "I want authentic," I said finally. "I'm not interested in performing family anymore, showing up for obligatory dinners, exchanging pleasantries, pretending we're close when we're not. But I'm open to building something real, if that's what you want too." Amanda stood abruptly, moving to the window and staring out at the city skyline. "I don't know what real even looks like," she admitted, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "I've been the accomplished daughter for so long I'm not sure who I am without it." "I understand that better than you might think." She turned back to me, eyes suspiciously bright. "Ryan misses you. He won't admit it, but he does. He keeps bringing up random Jessica facts at dinner. Jess makes the best apple pie. Jess knows how to fix that weird noise the dishwasher makes. It's annoying." I smiled despite myself, imagining my brother's awkward attempts to acknowledge my absence. "Tell him I miss him too." "Will you come to Sunday dinner? Just once?" It doesn't have to be this week, but sometime? The old Jessica would have immediately agreed, would have sacrificed her own plans and preferences to smooth over family conflict. The new Jessica considered what she actually wanted. Not this Sunday. I have hiking. But maybe the following week, if it's just dinner, no ulterior motives, no ambushes, no expectations. Amanda nodded, accepting the boundary without argument. Another, small, significant shift. I'll tell Mom and Dad. They'll be relieved. After she left, I continued packing, wrapping dishes in newspaper, sorting books into keep and donate piles, deciding what to bring into my new life and what to leave behind. It wasn't just physical belongings I was evaluating, but relationships, habits, beliefs about myself that no longer served me. The conversation with Amanda lingered in my mind, not because it resolved everything, but because it suggested a possibility I hadn't seriously considered. That my family might be capable of change, of growth, of meeting me somewhere new rather than demanding I return to where we had been. The following Sunday, I hiked with my new group to a waterfall in the Columbia River Gorge. The trail was challenging, the company engaging, the experience invigorating. As we rested at the base of the falls, water thundering down beside us, one of the other hikers, a woman named Grace who had been coming to these outings for years, asked me how I'd found the group. I needed to reclaim my Sundays, I said. Simply. She nodded as if this made perfect sense. Family traditions can become family obligations so easily. Sometimes you have to break the pattern to find what really matters. Exactly, I agreed, surprised by her insight. I did the same thing 15 years ago, she continued. Best decision I ever made. Not because I stopped seeing my family entirely, but because when I did see them, it was on terms that worked for all of us, not just them. As we hiked back, I thought about Grace's words and the path ahead. Not just the trail beneath my feet, but the life I was creating step by step. Perhaps there was a middle way between complete estrangement and complete capitulation, a relationship with my family that honored who I was becoming without requiring me to shrink myself again. The following Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for dinner. I parked in the driveway rather than on the street, a small assertion of belonging. I brought a bottle of wine I liked, not what my mother typically served. I wore a bright yellow sweater that would have previously earned a raised eyebrow and a comment about drawing attention. My father opened the door, surprise briefly crossing, his face before he composed himself. Jessica, good to see you. Hi, Dad, I said, stepping forward to give him a brief hug, something we rarely did. His body stiffened momentarily before awkwardly returning the gesture. The house looked exactly the same, yet somehow smaller than I remembered. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression guarded but hopeful. You came, she said softly. I said I would. She nodded, unsure of the protocol for this new version of our relationship. Dinner's almost ready. Amanda and Ryan are in the living room. I followed her through the familiar hallway, noticing details I'd overlooked before. How the family photos were arranged chronologically. How they told a story of perfect moments rather than authentic ones. How they created an idealized narrative that none of us had actually lived. Amanda looked up when I entered, relief evident in her smile. Ryan jumped up from the couch, awkward in his enthusiasm. Jess, you're here. I was just telling Amanda about that time you fixed Dad's car with duct tape and a hair clip. It was a bobby pin, actually, I corrected, returning his smile. And it was just a temporary fix. Still saved the camping trip, he insisted. Dad would have made us turn back otherwise. It was a small memory, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but the fact that he had preserved it, had apparently been sharing it in my absence, touched something deep inside me. Dinner was strained at first, conversation careful, topics neutral, everyone hyper-aware of potential landmines. But as the meal progressed, something shifted. Perhaps it was the wine. Perhaps it was sheer exhaustion with pretense. But gradually, the facade began to crack. "I hate these Sunday dinners," Ryan blurted out after a particularly long silence. "Always have. The good china, the formal dining room, the performance of it all. Can't we just eat in the kitchen like normal people?" My mother looked stricken. "But this is how we've always done it," she protested. "It's tradition. It's performance," I said quietly, echoing Ryan's observation. "And I think we're all tired of performing." Amanda set down her fork with deliberate care. "I've been seeing a therapist," she announced to the table at large. Since the party that wasn't, she thinks I have a pathological need for external validation." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Apparently that's not uncommon in oldest daughters." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Is this really appropriate dinner conversation? More appropriate than pretending we're a functional family when we're not," I said, surprising myself with the directness. "We can keep doing what we've always done and get what we've always gotten, or we can try something different." "Different how?" my mother asked. And for once, the question seemed genuine. Rather than rhetorical, I took a breath, feeling the weight of this moment, the potential for real change, the risk of disappointment, the courage required to be honest after a lifetime of accommodation. "Different, like actually getting to know each other," I suggested. "Not as roles, the successful husband, the perfect wife, the accomplished daughter, the beloved son, the disappointment. As people, with flaws and feelings and needs." "That sounds—" My father searched for the right word. "Uncomfortable." I laughed, the sound unexpectedly light. "It probably will be. Most growth is." "I'm willing to try," my mother said, her voice small but determined. "If you are." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. There were no tearful embraces, no profound apologies, no promises of instant transformation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that what we had been doing wasn't working, and perhaps it was time to try another way. After dinner, as I prepared to leave, my mother walked me to the door. She hesitated, then said, "The house you bought. Would you show it to me sometime? Not to criticize or suggest changes, just to see where you'll be living." The request surprised me, both its content and its careful phrasing, the explicit promise not to judge or take over. It was such a small thing, yet it represented a significant shift in how she approached our relationship. "I'd like that," I said. "Maybe next weekend? The renovations are just starting, so it's a bit of a mess." "I don't mind a mess," she said, then added with a hint of self-awareness, "Well, that's not entirely true. I do mind mess, quite a lot actually. But I mind missing out on your life more." It wasn't everything, but it was something. A beginning, a possibility, a seed that might grow into something healthier if tended carefully. As I drove home, I thought about Aunt Helen, what she would make of these tentative steps toward a new kind of family relationship, whether this was what she had hoped for when she set her plan in motion. I hoped she would be pleased, but more importantly, I hoped she would recognize that regardless of how things evolved with my family, I had found my voice, my value, my place in the world. The name tag, Jessica, the disappointment, still rested in my dresser drawer. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a marker of transformation. I had been invisible for so long, had made myself small to avoid criticism, had accepted scraps of attention and called it love. But invisibility had given me one crucial advantage. I had seen everything, noticed everything, understood the dynamics that others were too caught up in their roles to recognize. Now, stepping into visibility on my own terms, I carried that clarity with me. I wasn't the disappointment anymore, but I wasn't seeking to become the success or the perfect daughter either. I was simply becoming more fully myself, complicated, worthy, human, and inviting others to meet me there if they chose to. Some would, some might not. But for the first time in my life, my worth didn't depend on their choice. 2 months. After that first tentative Sunday dinner, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, surrounded by paint samples, tile options, and the pleasant chaos of renovation. The bungalow was gradually transforming, walls coming down, windows being replaced, the cramped bathroom expanding into a space that would soon hold a clawfoot tub I'd found at a salvage yard. Each change, each decision made the house more distinctly mine. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my contemplation of cabinet hardware. I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to answer, already knowing who it would be. Marie, my mother, had been visiting regularly since I'd first shown her the house, her interest in the renovation process surprising us both. "I brought lunch," she announced when I opened the door, holding up a bag from my favorite deli. "And paint opinions, if you want them." I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she'd dressed casually for once, jeans and a simple blouse rather than her usual polished ensemble. Another small shift in our evolving relationship. "How's the bathroom coming along?" she asked, setting the food on the kitchen counter and looking around appreciatively at the changes since her last visit. "Slowly, the plumber found issues with the original pipes that need fixing before we can move forward." She nodded, unsurprised. "These old houses always have secrets hiding in the walls. Your father and I discovered an entire chimney hidden behind drywall when we renovated the master bathroom." It still felt strange to have these normal conversations with her, exchanges without underlying tension or expectation. Strange, but not unwelcome. We ate lunch sitting on folding chairs in what would eventually be my dining room, comparing notes on neighborhood restaurants and local contractors. The ease between us was new, fragile, but growing stronger with each interaction. "I've been thinking about what you said," my mother said abruptly, setting down her sandwich. "About getting to know each other as people, not roles." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I realized I don't know simple things about you. What you like to read, what music you enjoy, whether you prefer summer or winter." She smiled ruefully. Basic things a mother should know about her daughter. "It's not too late to learn," I offered. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'd like that. To start with, I'm curious. What made you choose this house? It's nothing like what I would have expected." The question was genuine, without judgment or hidden critique. "It reminded me of Aunt Helen's place in Seattle," I admitted. "Not in specifics, but in feeling. The light, the character, the sense of possibility. It felt like somewhere I could be myself." My mother's face softened at the mention of Helen. "She always did have good taste," she said, surprising me. "Not conventional, but distinctly her own. I envied that about her, though I never told her. So, it was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever shared with me. A glimpse behind the perfect facade she maintained, an acknowledgement of her own insecurities." "Why didn't you tell her?" I asked gently. Marie sighed, looking around at the half-finished space. "Pride, mostly. We established our roles early. She was the free spirit. I was the practical one. After a while, it seemed too late to change. The script." She met my eyes directly. "I don't want to make the same mistake with you." The vulnerability in her expression touched something deep inside me. Not erasing years of hurt and misunderstanding, but offering a bridge across them. "My favorite color is teal," I said, gesturing to the kitchen walls I'd already painted. "I prefer autumn to any other season. I read mystery novels and poetry, which seems contradictory, but somehow works for me. I love early mornings and hate staying up late. I'm learning pottery and I'm terrible at it, but it makes me happy anyway." My mother listened intently, nodding occasionally, absorbing these simple facts about me with surprising focus. When I finished, she smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one she used for photographs and social gatherings. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. After she left, I continued working on the house, installing cabinet pulls in the kitchen, a small task I could complete myself amid the larger projects requiring professional help. As I measured and drilled, I thought about our conversation, the tentative steps we were taking toward knowing each other. It wasn't just my mother making efforts. Amanda had invited me to lunch several times, our conversations gradually moving beyond surface pleasantries to more substantial topics. She'd confided her doubts about her upcoming wedding, her concerns that she was marrying James more for his resume than his personality. "I don't know if I love him or if he just looks good on paper," she'd admitted over coffee last week. How terrible is that? Instead of reassuring her or dismissing her concerns, I'd asked questions, helped her explore her feelings without judgment. It was a new dynamic for us, sisters supporting rather than competing, listening rather than performing. Ryan had shown up one weekend with a toolbox and pizza, offering to help with whatever renovation tasks I had planned. We'd spent the day installing ceiling fans, his engineering knowledge complementing my organizational skills, working together in comfortable silence interspersed with casual conversation. "Remember when Dad taught us to change a tire?" I asked as we took a break on the front porch. "You got it on the first try, and I dropped all the lug nuts in the storm drain." I'd laughed, surprised he remembered. Dad was so annoyed. "With me, not you," Ryan had corrected. "You were always the capable one." I noticed, even if no one said it. These small moments, these acknowledgments of a shared past viewed through different perspectives, were healing something I hadn't realized was broken. Not just my relationship with my family, but my understanding of my own history. The following week brought a new challenge in this evolving family dynamic. My father called, something he rarely did, asking if he could stop by the house to discuss something important. His formal tone set off old warning bells, but I agreed, curious about what could prompt this unusual request. He arrived precisely on time, dressed in his customary business attire despite it being Saturday. He stood awkwardly in my half-finished living room, taking in the colorful walls, the eclectic furniture, the general sense of work in progress. "You've done a lot with the place," he said, his tone difficult to read. "It's getting there," I replied, offering him coffee, which he accepted with a nod. We sat in mismatched chairs, the silence between us thick with unspoken history. My father had always been the most distant member of our family, hiding behind work and delegating emotional matters to my mother. I waited, letting him find his way to whatever had prompted this visit. "Your mother tells me you two have been talking," he finally said, each word carefully measured. "Really talking, about substantive things." I nodded, wondering where this was leading. "She seems lighter, different." He set his coffee down, fidgeting slightly, a surprising tell from a man who prided himself on self-control. "I've been thinking about our family, about the roles we've all played, mine included." Something in his voice caught my attention, note of uncertainty I'd never heard before from Thomas Anderson, a man who presented absolute confidence to the world. "I wasn't a very present father," he continued, the admission clearly difficult for him. "I told myself I was providing, building security, creating opportunities for all of you. But the truth is, I used work to avoid the messier aspects of family life." The honesty was startling coming from him. I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "When you canceled Marie's party, it forced me to face some uncomfortable truths about how I had taken you for granted, expected you to fill gaps without acknowledgement." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I failed you as a father in many ways." The apology, so unexpected and straightforward, momentarily left me speechless. In all our family's tentative steps toward rebuilding relationships, my father had remained largely on the periphery, polite but distant. "Thank you for saying that," I finally managed. He nodded, seeming relieved. "To have the words out. I'd like to do better, if you're willing to let me try. Not to make up for lost time, I know that's not possible, but to build something new going forward." "I'd like that too," I said, surprised to find I meant it. We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon, the longest conversation we'd ever had without interruption or distraction. He told me about his own father, a man who had shown love through provision rather than presence, and how he had unconsciously replicated that pattern. I shared what it had felt like growing up in his shadow, seeking approval that rarely came, eventually giving up and focusing on making myself useful instead. Neither of us cried. We were too similar in our emotional restraint for that. But something shifted between us, a wall beginning to crumble, allowing glimpses of the person behind the role. As he prepared to leave, my father paused, looking around the living room once more. "You've created something special here," he said, and I understood he meant more than just the house. "It's a work in progress," I replied, the phrase applying to far more than the renovation. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Aren't we all?" That evening, I sat on my back porch, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, checking in about our plans to visit the coast again the following weekend. I replied, confirming our arrangements, grateful for her steady friendship throughout this period of transformation. It had been 4 months since the name tag, since the canceled party, since I had walked away from patterns established over decades. 4 months of rebuilding. Not just my house, but myself, my relationships, my understanding of what family could mean. There had been setbacks, of course. Sunday dinners sometimes slipped back into old dynamics, tensions erupting when guards were lowered. My mother occasionally forgot our new boundaries, offering unsolicited advice or making assumptions about my availability. Amanda's competitive instincts still surfaced, especially when our parents showed interest in my renovation, progress, or career developments. But there was also growth, genuine effort, moments of connection that would have seemed impossible before. We were learning to see each other as complex individuals, rather than fixed characters in a family drama, a process as uncomfortable as it was necessary. My phone buzzed again, this time with an unexpected name, Gregory, the event manager from Garden View Terrace. I hesitated before opening the message, unsure what could prompt contact after all this time. "Ms. Anderson, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to let you know we have an opening for an event planner on our team. Your work on your mother's event, despite its cancellation, was impressive. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities? No pressure either way." I stared at the message, an unexpected door opening where I hadn't even known a wall existed. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the event I had planned and canceled might lead to a new professional path. I had always enjoyed the organizational aspects of my accounting work, the satisfaction of bringing order to chaos, but had never considered applying those skills in a more creative context. I replied thanking Gregory for thinking of me, expressing cautious interest in learning more. Setting the phone aside, I let myself imagine a different professional future, one aligned not with what was expected of me or what seemed safest, but with what genuinely engaged my strengths and interests. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the coast, not waiting for the weekend with Sophia, but needing the clarity that came with ocean air and open horizons. The beach was nearly empty, just a few dog walkers and determined joggers braving the morning chill. I walked for hours, letting thoughts rise and fall like the tide, considering paths and possibilities. The Jessica who had meticulously planned her mother's birthday celebration, attentive to every detail, anticipating needs before they arose, creating an experience tailored to specific preferences, had been using skills honed through years of family dynamics. Skills that could perhaps be redirected toward more fulfilling purposes. By the time I returned to Portland that evening, something had settled within me. A decision not fully formed but taking shape, a direction emerging from the fog of possibilities. The following week brought another unexpected development. Amanda called, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I broke up with James," she announced without preamble. "Called off the wedding. Mom's in crisis mode. Dad's concerned about the financial implications, and I'm actually okay. Better than okay. Relieved." "Where are you?" I asked, hearing background noise that suggested she wasn't at home. "Sitting in my car in your driveway," she admitted. "I didn't know where else to go." 20 minutes later, we sat on my back porch, cups of tea warming our hands against the evening chill. Amanda looked simultaneously exhausted and energized, like someone who had set down an enormous burden and was adjusting to the strange lightness. "Everyone thinks I'm having a breakdown," she said, gazing out at the darkening yard. "Making an impulsive emotional decision I'll regret, but it's the most rational choice I've ever made." "What made you decide?" I asked. She considered this, taking a sip of tea before answering. "Something you said, actually, about wanting authentic. I realized I've never had that with James, never had that with anyone, really. I've been so focused on maintaining the appearance of a perfect life that I forgot to create a life I actually want to live." The echo of my own journey in her words was striking. "And what do you want?" "That's the terrifying part," she laughed softly. "I have no idea. For the first time in my life, I don't have a 5-year plan, a perfectly curated goal to chase. I'm just here, figuring it out as I go." "It's not a bad place to be," I offered. "Uncomfortable, but not bad." Amanda studied me, her expression thoughtful. "You seem different, settled somehow, like you've found your center." "I'm working on it," I acknowledged. "It's an ongoing process." "Any wisdom to share with your newly derailed sister?" I smiled at her self-deprecating tone, so different from the polished confidence she usually projected. "Just that getting lost can be the first step to finding where you actually want to go, and that you don't have to figure it all out at once." She nodded, absorbing this. "Can I stay here tonight? I'm not ready to face the full Anderson Inquisition yet." "Of course," I said without hesitation. "The guest room's a mess of renovation supplies, but the couch is surprisingly comfortable." "Thank you," she said simply, the words carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. That night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving through my home, I reflected on how much had changed, not just in my relationship with Amanda, but in how I responded to her need. There was no resentment, no sense of obligation, no mental calculation of what this favor might cost me. Just a straightforward desire to support someone I cared about during a difficult transition, giving freely rather than from fear or expectation. Amanda stayed for 3 days, helping with painting and tile work during the day, talking long, into the evening about childhood memories, family patterns, future possibilities. We discovered commonalities we'd never acknowledged, shared experiences viewed through different lenses, mutual frustrations with expectations that had shaped us, both, albeit in opposite directions. "Do you remember Mom's garden party phase?" Amanda asked one evening as we sat amid paint cans and drop cloths, eating takeout directly from the containers. "When we were in middle school and she decided to become Portland's premier hostess." I laughed, the memory vivid. Those ridiculous hats she made us wear, and the finger sandwiches no one actually liked. "She was trying so hard to be something she wasn't," Amanda said thoughtfully. "We all were, in different ways." "Still are, sometimes," I acknowledged. Old habits die hard. But we're trying, she pointed out. That counts for something, right? It counts for everything, I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. When Amanda finally returned to her own apartment, our relationship had shifted, not magically healed of all past hurts, but fundamentally altered. We had begun to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. The weekend arrived, bringing my planned trip to the coast with Sophia. We stayed at the same rental cottage where we'd sought refuge after the canceled party, its weathered charm now familiar and welcoming. So much has changed since we were last here, Sophia observed as we walked along the shore, the setting sun painting the water in shades of gold and rose. You've rebuilt your entire life in what, 4 months? Not rebuilt, I corrected. Reclaimed. The pieces were always there, just arranged according to someone else's design. She nodded, understanding immediately as she always did. And now? Now I'm figuring out my own pattern. It's messy and imperfect, but it's mine. We stopped to watch a group of plovers scurrying along the water's edge, their delicate legs blurring with speed as they chased the retreating waves. I met with Gregory yesterday, I said, referring to the event manager who had reached out about potential employment. He offered me a position as an associate planner, with the opportunity to specialize in private celebrations rather than corporate events. That sounds perfect for you, Sophia said, genuine pleasure in her voice. All those organizational skills put to creative use. Are you going to take it? I nodded. I gave notice at the accounting firm yesterday. They were surprised but supportive. Keith even offered to keep me on as a consultant for some of the clients I've worked with long-term. How does it feel? She asked. Making such a big change? I considered this, searching for the right words to describe the mix of excitement and terror, certainty and doubt, grief for a path not taken, and anticipation for one newly discovered. It feels like coming home to a place I've never been, I said finally. Familiar and unknown at the same time. Sophia smiled, squeezing my hand briefly before we continued our walk. That sounds exactly right. Later that evening, sitting on the cottage deck with blankets against the coastal chill, Sophia asked the question I'd been expecting. What about your mother's name tag? Do you still have it? Yes, I admitted. In my dresser drawer. Why keep it? I had asked myself the same question many times over the past months. Why preserve such a painful artifact? Why not burn it, shred it, destroy all evidence of that moment of clarity and pain? It reminds me, I said slowly, not of their perception, but of my decision. Not what was done to me, but what I did in response. I looked out at the darkness where the ocean murmured invisibly beyond our sight. It marks a turning point I never want to forget. Sophia nodded, understanding as she always did. From invisible to invincible, she said with a smile. Or at least from background character to protagonist in your own story. Something like that, I agreed, the description fitting better than she knew. We sat in comfortable silence after that, listening to the waves, each lost in our own thoughts beneath a sky scattered with stars. Tomorrow we would return to Portland, to renovations and family dynamics and new career paths. But for now, this moment of peace was enough. This recognition of how far I had come, how much had changed since I first saw those 2 damning words written in elegant calligraphy. The disappointment. A label that had broken something fundamental in me, and in breaking, had allowed something stronger, truer to emerge from the fragments. When we returned to Portland the next day, there was a message waiting from my mother, asking if I would help plan a small celebration for my father's upcoming birthday. Not a grand event, she specified, just family and a few close friends. And she wanted my input, my vision, not just my organizational skills. I smiled as I read it, recognizing the invitation for what it was, an acknowledgement of my talents, a request rather than an expectation, an opportunity to use gifts that had once been taken for granted in a context of mutual respect. I replied that I would be happy to help, suggesting we meet for coffee to discuss ideas. A simple exchange, unremarkable on its surface, but representing a profound shift in our family's gravitational field. That evening, I stood in my partially renovated kitchen, preparing a simple dinner amid the creative chaos of my home. Through the window, I could see the first fireflies of the season appearing in my backyard, their intermittent glow a reminder that light, even when it seems to disappear, always returns. The name tag was still in my dresser drawer, a reminder not of shame but of transformation. I had been invisible until I wasn't, erased until I rewrote my own story in indelible ink. The disappointment, who had disappointed no one but those who couldn't see her worth, and who had finally, crucially, refused to be defined by their blindness. 1 year after I discovered that name tag, I stood in the garden of the newly renovated community center, watching guests arrive for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The space had been transformed from a neglected municipal building into a vibrant hub for local artists, small business workshops, and youth programs. My latest project as an event coordinator for Garden View Properties, and perhaps the one closest to my heart. Gregory stood nearby, checking last-minute details with his characteristic attention to precision. He caught my eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "This is magnificent, Jessica," a voice said behind me. I turned to find my mother, elegant in a simple blue dress, surveying the space with genuine appreciation. "You've created something special here." "Thank you," I replied, accepting both the compliment and her quick embrace without the old tension that would have once accompanied such an exchange. "I'm glad you could make it." I wouldn't have missed it. Neither would Thomas. He's parking the car. She hesitated, then added, "We're proud of you. I hope you know that." The words settled around me, neither defining nor diminishing me, simply one note in the complex composition my life had become. "That means a lot," I said, and meant it. My mother smiled, then moved toward the refreshment table where Amanda was already engaged in animated conversation with several community artists. My sister had undergone her own transformation over the past year, leaving her corporate law position to work with a nonprofit supporting arts education in underserved communities. The change had brought out something vibrant in her that had always been hidden beneath perfectly tailored suits and carefully measured ambitions. Ryan appeared at my side, camera in hand. "Where do you want me to set up?" I was thinking near the mural for the official photos. My brother had discovered a passion for photography in recent months, his engineer's precision finding new expression through the lens. He'd volunteered his services for today's event, his gift to me and to the center we had all, in various ways, helped bring to life. "The mural would be perfect," I agreed. "Thanks for doing this." He grinned, the expression relaxed in a way it never had been during family gatherings of the past. "What are brothers for? Besides, it's good practice." As Ryan moved away to set up his equipment, I took a moment to absorb the scene. The repurposed building now alive with color and purpose. The garden designed to serve both beauty and function, with community vegetable plots alongside ornamental flowers, the diverse group of people gathering to celebrate this new beginning. Among them, I spotted Sophia chatting with my father, an unlikely pair united by their shared support of my journey. Nearby, several of my colleagues from Garden View mingled with local artists and community organizers. Even Keith from my old accounting firm had come, having become a valuable ally in helping the center establish sound financial practices. In a quiet corner of the garden stood a small memorial bench, its brass plaque catching the afternoon sunlight. In memory of Helen Parker, she saw possibilities others missed. My tribute to the aunt whose final request had changed everything, funded by the remainder of what would have been my mother's birthday celebration budget. I had worried when I first proposed the memorial that it might reopen old wounds within the family. Instead, it had become a touchstone for healing, a place where my mother sometimes sat in quiet contemplation, where Amanda had first articulated her desire for meaningful work rather than prestigious titles, where my father had shared rare stories of his own sister, lost to childhood illness long before any of us were born. The small band began playing, signaling the start of the ceremony. I moved toward the podium, notes in hand, heart full of purpose and gratitude. As the community gathered around, faces turned expectantly toward me, I felt none of the old urge to disappear, to make myself smaller, to avoid attention. "Welcome," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Today we celebrate not just a building, but the power of transformation, of spaces, of communities, and of ourselves." From the audience, my family watched, not with the critical assessment I had once dreaded, but with genuine support, with pride untainted by expectation. They saw me now, truly saw me, not as an extension of themselves or a supporting character in their narratives, but as a whole person with gifts and flaws, strengths and struggles, a unique voice worth hearing. The name tag that had once defined me, Jessica, the disappointment, still resided in my dresser drawer, not as an open wound but as a relic of a former life, a reminder of how far I had come. Beside it now lay another, a simple Jessica. Anderson, event director, from my first major function with Garden View, equally calligraphed but carrying a profoundly different weight. Both were true in their way. Both were part of my story. But neither contained the whole truth of who I was or who I was becoming. As I continued my speech, thanking those who had contributed to the center's creation, I caught Sophia's eye in the crowd. She gave me a subtle nod of acknowledgement, a private communication between friends who had weathered storms together, who had seen each other at their lowest and their highest, who recognized the milestone this moment represented. The journey from invisibility to authenticity hadn't been linear or simple. There had been steps backward, old patterns reasserting themselves in moments of stress or uncertainty. There had been difficult conversations, boundaries tested and reinforced, days when it seemed easier to slip back into familiar roles than to maintain this new, more demanding way of relating. But with each challenge met, each honest exchange navigated, the foundation grew stronger. Not perfect, nothing made by human hands or hearts ever could be, but genuine, resilient, alive with possibility. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and explored the new center, my mother approached again, this time with something in her hand, a small gift bag tied with silver ribbon. "I wanted to give you this," she said, her expression unusually vulnerable, "to mark the occasion." Inside was a delicate silver frame containing a photograph I had never seen before, myself, at perhaps 7 years old, focused intently on building, an elaborate structure from blocks while sunlight streamed through a window, illuminating my absorbed expression. "I found it when we were organizing the attic," she explained softly. "I'd forgotten it existed, but looking at it now, I can see. You were always a builder, always creating spaces for others to inhabit even then." The image blurred slightly as unexpected tears filled my eyes, not for the years of invisibility, but for this proof that someone had seen me, if only for the moment it took to capture this photograph, long before I had learned to see myself. "Thank you," I said simply, the words encompassing far more than the physical gift. My mother nodded, understanding in her eyes that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "We all build with what we have," she said. "You've built something beautiful, Jessica. Both here." She gestured around at the community center. "And within our family." As the afternoon light softened toward evening, I found myself standing, alone for a moment by Aunt Helen's memorial bench, the day's success settling around me like a gentle embrace. In the distance, I could see my family engaged in various conversations. My father deep in discussion with a local business owner, Amanda laughing with Sophia, Ryan photographing children exploring the new playground equipment. They were there, and I was here, separate but connected, individual but part of something larger. The distance between us now was not the cold void of invisibility, but the healthy space of differentiation, allowing each of us room to grow, to change, to be fully ourselves within the constellation of family. You were right, Helen, I whispered to the empty bench. About everything. The evening breeze stirred the garden flowers, carrying the scent of new growth and possibilities yet to unfold. I had been invisible until I chose to be seen, erased until I rewrote my own story, disappointed until I redefined success on my own terms. Now I stood firmly in the light of my own creation, author and architect of a life no one could cancel. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.